Hey, KU fans, welcome back to the KU Sports Hour here at KUsports.com with Shane Jackson and Shane Jackson alone. I'm your host, Matt Tate. And Shane, I don't know about you, but I feel like, number one, you're going to get a lot more words in on this podcast. That's not necessarily because Benton's real wordy. It's just because there's one less body, and I'm real wordy. So right now you've said one word, and if I keep talking, you'll have said none.
Yeah.
And there's another one. So you see what I'm saying? Like, I think you're already in the rhythm. You're already in the flow. You're already crushing it.
I thought you were going to mention my name twice, like when you said Shane Jackson and Shane Jackson. I thought you were just so used to being in a rhythm of saying two people that you had just forgotten that Benton wasn't here, and you were just going to mention me twice. So I was getting really excited. I thought I was going to get twice the credit for being here.
Yeah, well, we'll see how you do. And if you do well, then, you'll get twice the credit on the outro. Does that sound good?
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, Benton's got some appointments or something going today, and we wanted to get this one in before the draft and wanted to get this one in before next week when we get together, all three of us, and do our full-on blowout KU basketball season preview podcast. So look for that early next week. Maybe Tuesday is what I think we're shooting for, but didn't want to skip a week just because Benton's busy and because, we're a week away from the season starting. So we're here. Shane and I are here, and we're going to talk a little NBA draft, as I mentioned, and then talk some football and maybe some basketball too before we get out of here. But Shane, I know, number one, you just started your own brand new Lakers podcast, which is not going to really make any sense to anybody listening. But give me a quick, 1 second, 2 second synopsis on why you're doing that. I think it's great. I mean, you're Mr. Podcast. You're everywhere right now. NFL podcast, Lakers, this one. But yeah, well, I mean, I know you're a LeBron guy. People listening might know that too. So is that it? Is it that simple? Or is it truly like a Lakers thing too?
Pretty much. I mean, my best friend is a lifelong Lakers fan. And but basically, especially this past year, we bonded a lot over the Lakers basketball. We watched every playoff game together or over Zoom in some way. And then we would just spend, an hour breaking down the Lakers together after. And we're just like, we might as well just start a podcast. And it's, not trying to be experts on the Lakers. It's just two fans talking. And I think there's obviously a platform for that for every team, for every sport. So, because, it's easy to listen to like KU and hear us talk about it because we're covering the team. But, you don't get the raw, I guess, fan emotion from us anyways. So I think that there's an element to that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, it'll be fun. So clearly, if you're starting a Lakers podcast, and clearly if you point this down right here, I got some NBA love in me, obviously, as well. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing a Lakers podcast and you love LeBron, you must love the draft, huh?
Oh, I love the draft in almost any sport. It may not be one of those things until I don't pay attention to it until like a day or two before type of thing. But like, I'll get into like watching the draft coverage. Similar, watching election coverage every 4 years. Like that's interesting to me as well. So no, I get into the draft in every sport just because I think it is fun to project what a player can do at the next level.
No doubt, man. I used to do way back in high school, junior high. The day after the draft. I guess it was always in the summer, so it must have been leading up to the draft, which I probably should have been doing schoolwork instead, but it worked out. But yeah, I would write out projected lineups for every team in my notebooks, and then the night of the draft, it was always my favorite night, man. The NBA draft has always been my favorite, and I do exactly that. Like 60 picks are in, and then I project the starting lineups the next year for every team, and woefully wrong every time because I always put every draft pick. I mean, at least every first round pick was always going to be a starter, and we all know that doesn't happen. I didn't know that as a kid, but I do now. So I think it's such a fun thing. I went out there earlier during my time with KU Sports 5 years in a row and covered the draft, and that was one of the coolest experiences ever. Covered a bunch of lottery picks. Bill Self's known to do that, right? He puts those guys up there. And then the last one I covered was Andrew Wiggins as the number 1 overall pick. So New York City's the best. The draft is the best. I miss it for sure. I loved going out there, but things changed a little bit, and KU also hasn't had the surefire lottery type guys as much in the last handful of years. So, including last year when there was no one picked. So I think it's obviously still something that KU fans though get excited about. Real quick before we get into it a little more, what's your take on Udoka and Devon Dotson tonight? I mean, if you've been paying attention even in the last day or two only, you know they're going somewhere. I mean, that's the deal. They're going to get picked. They're on every mock draft. But what's your feel for these guys right now?
Yeah, I mean, reading just your story this morning would give you an idea that both these guys are probably somewhere between late first round to somewhere in the second round is more a likely scenario. And yeah, I think that's probably a good assessment based off all the mock drafts. And they both obviously had good college careers, but they both have their own limitations potentially at the next level for people who are projecting that and how they can make an impact. And so, hearing even Self talk about it last week or whatever, I thought that was very insightful to acknowledge that, hey, even though these guys were really good college players, like there's a reason why, all the best players are in this league here. And to just assume that they're going to be starters is a little bit naive, and just filling out a backup role should be a goal, at least early on, for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And I think that's where they're headed. And I think that's a good spot. I mean, if you can be a part of a second unit, and especially as a point guard, if you can be a guy that's capable of running a second unit, your value's sky high. I mean, that's important stuff at that level. And unlike the college game where Devontae Graham, Frank Mason, Svi, those guys could play 38, 39 minutes a game, 7, 8, 10, 12 games in a row, maybe all 40. There's still just rest. I mean, even in the playoffs, LeBron gets rest, right? I mean, it's a system. There's a routine to it, and even the best players do sit some. Now, obviously, when the stakes are high and games on the line and all that stuff, those guys are going to find their way out on the floor. But even then, I mean, you watch the playoffs. I mean, LeBron still got his rest, right? Yeah. I mean, and part of that's his age. He's no spring chicken, but still, I mean, they've got to have guys they can go to. And I think if either of these guys or both of these guys can find their way into, embracing that idea, which I don't know, man, it's got to be tough, right? I mean, obviously that's the goal. You want to get to the NBA your whole life if you're in those shoes. But you've also spent your whole life being one of the best players on your team and having the ball and having things run for you and all of that. And that was the case for obviously both guys at KU and before that. So I think mentally it's got to be tough. It's got to be a tough switch to flip. But I do think that you have plenty of time to prepare for it. And these guys, they've got good people in their corners. They've got people helping them with that idea, that transition, explaining to them that this is what's next. And this is just how it goes. Go do this well, and then you can get back to what you're used to.
Yeah, especially for someone like Udoka, who basically transformed his body this last year and transformed some parts of his game as well to get to the NBA. Will he have that same mindset and mentality if he is, a backup player or, has a limited role at the next level? That remains to be seen, obviously, but there's no reason to think otherwise based off what we've seen from him the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think they fit? I mean, we're talking backup, obviously, but I mean, they both have enough talent to play, don't they?
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, both of them have their strengths are, what teams should like. I mean, Udoka obviously is going to be good in a pick-and-roll situation and playing above the rim, both offensively and defensively, whereas Dotson, he's got that straight-line speed. I mean, he's very quick and can get downhill in a hurry. And I think both of those traits are appealing to NBA teams, especially athletically. I mean, obviously they tested really well at the combine. So I think they do have qualities that, should let them have some success at the next level.
What's cool about it too is that the advantage that they have in that role that they'll probably play or hope to play is they're not going to be out there against the Kawhi Leonards and Devin Bookers and Chris Pauls and Russell Westbrooks and John Walls. I mean, they're, that's just a few guys, obviously, but they're not going to be out there against those guys all the time, right? And they might in spots and depending on, health and whatever the matchups are and all that. But for the most part, they're second unit guys playing against other second unit guys. And I think that should give them a great chance to succeed because these dudes are both very confident, right? I mean, Devon Dotson, I guarantee that he has all the confidence in the world that he can go up to that level and play with anybody. And he won't have to test himself against all those guys I just mentioned and others. You know, he'll have to test himself against guys that are also in his shoes, where they were stars on their college team, and now they're running second units. And I mean, that's where I think the idea of falling back on what I did in college. What'd you know, I was an All-American. What were you? Nothing? Okay, well, I'll go by you. You're a chump. You know, I mean, that kind of mentality that it's not exactly even, because they're coming into this league with superstars and years of experience and just crazy talent and all that. But once you get down to that next level where it's the second unit against the second unit, then they can realize, okay, yeah, I killed this guy in AAU a couple years ago. I'm not worried about him. Watch me go by him now, you know, and things like that. So I think they're both mentally, and obviously Udoka's in that boat too. I mean, everything he did this year to get himself ready, it was phenomenal. I mean, he played himself into being drafted, and I think there were a lot of people going into last season that we're still pretty sure that, you know, the old classic center isn't going to find a spot in the NBA these days, and he proved without question that he was more than that, and that's a credit to his hard work. There's no doubt about it. I mean, watching him play last year, watching him transform his body, man, not only did he do that, but KU put him in position to do it. And I think both of these guys, even though they might not be superstars ever, or certainly not right away, I think both of these guys could be very valuable to Kansas in the recruiting world, because Bill Self can look at these guys and talk to recruits in the future and say, look, this happened. And you know, he wasn't a lock to be drafted, but we put him in position to get there. We helped him work his body. We helped him showcase his game. And in this case, we're talking about Udoka. And it worked. And he got drafted 30th or 35th or whatever he ends up going. So, yeah, it's nice to have Joel Embiid in your corner and Andrew Wiggins in your corner and you know, other lottery picks that they've had. But these guys, I think, in the recruiting realm can work and be just as valuable, because like a Devontae Graham's the same way, right? I mean, that guy's got to be one of the first things you talk about if you're Bill Self recruiting a point guard. You say, well, look what he did for us and look what he's doing now. And I don't know that Devon Dotson's going to do that. He doesn't shoot it as well. He's not as big, but he can definitely find his own spot.
Yeah, and I think I did like how Bill Self, I think last week, mentioned that Udoka in certain situations showed that he could at least be on a guard out there in the perimeter in a screen situation, which may have been one of the big concerns, especially when you're talking about the NBA. You're not asking him, hey, stick with the guard for the whole possession, but in a screen situation, if you can slide with him for a step or two and just wait for help defense to come over, then that is a good enough, I guess, to translate to the next level. And I think, to your point about the recruiting aspect, I mean, that's got to be one of the biggest recruiting selling points there. Like, hey, we showed that maybe one of his limitations in his final year, that it was good enough to maybe get picked to the next level. So, yeah, the easiest thing in the world is to say, hey, this is why this guy won't make it. It's figuring out how he fits on your team, especially at the NBA level.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm looking forward to seeing where both guys end up. And you know, throughout the past several weeks, I've heard all kinds of different things. I've heard either guy could go in the first round. I've heard the other guy could go in the second round. I've heard both could go in the second round. I've heard both early second round. I've heard one high and one low in the second round. I mean, you know, it depends on how many people you talk to, but there's all kinds of information out there. And who knows how much of it is legit, because every time the draft starts, things change, trades happen, guys catch fire, catch fever. You know, it gets wild. And obviously nobody's tipping their hand going into it. So it should be fun. We won't keep going on that because I want this podcast to kind of last the rest of the week. And after this, it will everybody will know on Thursday. Everybody will know where they went. So let's shift over to some football talk real quick. I thought it was really cool. You know, first of all, KU was off last week, another bye week, their third of the season. We heard Les Miles earlier this week talk about how that's been very important for this team that had no spring practice and had a really weird preseason camp. To get those extra bye weeks and those extra reps and that downtime where you're not preparing for an opponent, but you're just able to focus on reps and technique and fundamentals and just getting up to speed, basically. I mean, it sounds like they did a lot of that in this bye week, but I know they did it in previous bye weeks too. And I think that's been huge for these young guys that we're starting to see that are actually kind of making a name for themselves and starting to play well. That's huge for their development.
Yeah, that is a good point, because when talking to a couple high school coaches and if they miss games, they're like, hey, game reps is how you get better. Like, right. And they didn't ever feel like they got in a rhythm. So it is interesting to hear that Les Miles took basically the opposite approach. And obviously it's because they didn't miss, 2 weeks in between games or anything like that.
Right.
But having the extra bye week or bye weeks, and he took that as a good thing because of the no spring ball. And for me, my initial thought would have been like, hey, the only way this team's going to get better is by playing games. And maybe that's not true if you're losing by 40 against Big 12 teams. And you would rather just spend a week working on fundamentals or the ways that you can get better. So I did think that was interesting, the way Les brought how they used the bye week, and just the fact that they were able to get better because of the extra bye weeks.
Yeah, I mean, right? You said it perfect, man. Losing by 40 doesn't necessarily give you good reps, right? I mean, we've all been throughout our lives as people who've played sports and stuff, we've all been on the wrong end of a butt whipping, and you're not as focused, right? Like late in the game, sometimes you just want to get it over with and get out of there. And so those reps, and especially, I mean, some of these entire second halves for KU have been that way, right? Where I think they're still trying. I think they're still playing hard, but it's just, number one, a lot of times it's coming against second and third string guys for the other team. So you're not really measuring yourself up as well as you could be against starters. And number two, it's just, losing sucks. And you're mentally that you can only take so much of that. So I think the 3 bye weeks, while it's really weird to have that many, I think obviously it was put in place because of COVID and the change of the schedule and all that. But I think it's really what worked for KU's advantage, or to KU's advantage. Not this year, not to help them win games, because we know that's not happening, but to help those guys get a chance to kind of get away from the losses and the scoreboard and just focus on playing hard, working your reps, working with your position coach, and getting better. And I know that's a very boring and non-fun way to hear it if you're a fan, but man, to climb out of this hole, they have to take all of that. This journey has to include all of that stuff. You can't skip any steps when you're trying to rebuild. And so I think they haven't been. And you wrote a blog, I think during the bye week, about some of the younger guys that have stood out. Just tell me about that. I mean, you mentioned 3 guys. Why'd you pick those 3? And also we'll get into some other guys who have stood out as well.
Well, one of them was an older guy, so it's Kyron Johnson, I believe I picked out.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and he was like the only older guy that I picked out because his success as a pass rusher I thought was noticeable. But yeah, I mean, obviously Highshaw has had an increased role over the last few weeks, almost out of necessity. And I thought it was interesting to note that, PFF has graded him pretty highly over the last few weeks, and it should give fans optimism about the running back group in general. Maybe moving forward, because obviously losing Puka is a big blow for this fan base. So I picked him because I did notice a couple runs in the last few weeks that at least stood out to me. Like, hey, he's got some wiggle to him where he can shed a tackle or something like that. And I didn't necessarily think that before Puka left, because he didn't really have that much of an opportunity. So that's why I think I highlighted him in particular, just because the run game in general has not had a lot of success because the offense hasn't had a lot of success, but right. Highshaw has had his moments and somewhat of a limited sample size. And so over these last 3 weeks, players like Highshaw are probably going to have to show more of an opportunity down the stretch.
Yeah, they should get it, right? I mean, at this point, they want to go out and win games. And Les talked about that on Monday and said, we're still focused on Texas. That's who they play this weekend. So that's a good thing. But really, it's got to be about trying to find small victories now for these young guys to bank, right? And so, look, Kyron Johnson played plenty, right? And I mean, he's a guy. He's a guy, and he's going to be a guy next year. And they already know that. They don't need to see anything else from him. But guys like Highshaw or even guys on the O-line, they're starting to get a little more time out there. Small victories with those types of players. Kenny Logan's another one that
Yeah.
that is really shown who he is, and he's going to continue to get better. But you've got a guy you can like for your future right there. So yeah, I think Highshaw's a great example of that. I mean, I think that and Jalen Daniels is a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like Jalen Daniels has become a household name in KU circles, and Jalen Daniels has a lot about his game that you can like, but he still needs some small victories in these last 3 games. I mean, number one would be a victory for him would be watching the guys in front of you block guys so you can actually play the position. I mean, there's a small victory that has nothing to do with what he does, but boy, I bet it would feel amazing after that 9-sack Oklahoma loss. So, but yeah, I mean, he's still a guy that's trying to show that, yeah, you should put everything you've got in me because I'm your future. And there's a lot of guys up and down this lineup or up and down this roster who are in that same position. Any others jump out at you? Young guys that we've actually seen, or maybe even young guys that we haven't seen a ton of that we might see more of in the next 3 weeks?
Yeah, I thought you mentioned one of the bigger defensive names that maybe because of Prunty's success hasn't been highlighted as much, but Kenny Logan has been pretty impressive this year. I mean, his ability to just come up the field and make a stop in the run game is impressive. Obviously, everybody already knows about his kickoff return. They mentioned maybe using him on offense this week just because he is athletically gifted and has some offensive experience from high school. So to me, he's one of, I think, the more biggest surprises because I just didn't know a lot about the young players. And other than Prunty's obviously immediate success, I mean, I think Kenny Logan in particular should give fans the most optimism because he's been pretty good, especially from a safety position.
Yeah, I think that's dead on, man. I think I know Benton's planning to write more about Kenny Logan and probably will write about all these guys the rest of the way because, again, that's what they're evaluating. And of course, they're trying to win. But, we know how that's going right now. And so you have to look for other ways you can evaluate this thing. And that's one of them. Like, what do we got here? And so maybe there's some young guys. I mean, I think Deuce Mayberry's another name. I mean, Deuce has had a good year. It hasn't been great by any means. It's not on the same level as Prunty and Logan by any means, but he's shown he can be out there and with some continued improvement and then the experience, there's another guy. So all of a sudden there's your secondary right there. I mean, that's for a group that was a major question mark coming into 2020 because you lost almost everybody from last year. Now you've got some guys going into 2021 that you say, well, we've got some guys there and they still have to perform and they still have to get better. And the guys in front of them have to still do their jobs for it to matter, but at least you're starting to see it take shape. And I'm not trying to defend the program. I'm not trying to say it's in good shape. They are in a hole, and they continue to be in a hole, and it's ugly at times, and it's not necessarily going to get any better anytime soon. But these are the types of things you can look at to decide for yourself is there any hope that it'll get better? Doesn't mean it will, but can I at least look at this thing and see some hope? And I think with some of these names we've mentioned, you've got to say, even if you're the most pessimistic, skeptical fan, you've got to say these guys that we've just mentioned give you some hope that maybe it can get better. So,
and they haven't been perfect by any means, but the point is, I mean, especially when you're talking about losing by 40 to Big 12 teams, but the point is you're letting them make their mistakes. And if they can learn from them, that's the key, and if you can see noticeable growth over the final 3 games going into the offseason, it's obviously not going to translate to wins, but that could provide a sense of belief going forward.
Very good. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. Texas is what, a 4-touchdown favorite? Is that what you said?
Yeah. And climbing, I think it was, 29.5 at one point when I checked on FanDuel Sportsbook.
All right. Well,
yeah. And Texas hasn't covered in like 5 years against KU. So
I have no comment. I don't know. I mean, no comment.
I honestly, I think I've picked KU twice and they haven't covered either time. And I didn't feel confident when I picked them. So, and I don't know how I'll pick this game either. So
yeah, you do.
Maybe. It's a lot of points, so.
I'm just kidding. Well, one thing about that game, there will be no fans in the stands. KU on Tuesday, Chancellor Girard announced that they're going to pull the plug on fans in the stands for the rest of the month. No volleyball, which they close their season this coming weekend. I think Thursday and Friday, actually. So That'll be the final home matches for them, but there will be no fans there. They've had fans for most of their matches this year, and obviously the last 2 football games, no fans there, and the first 2 women's basketball games, no fans there either. Right move, wrong move? What say you?
Well, I know it's very popular to have a strong take on anything, but I don't necessarily have one. Even if it's just based off perception alone, I think it probably is the right move.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't see the reason, especially with everything that's been going on recently. I don't see the reason to force the issue and have fans at these games. And even if nothing really happens because of it, I still think it's probably the right move to be at least overly cautious in this situation heading into the winter. When it's probably a little more concerning.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. I mean, I wrote back in July that they should just pull the plug on fans in the stands for the whole 2021 season. And I understand why they're not. I mean, they're losing money and they're trying to figure out ways to lose less and to save some of it and figure out just a way to hold on. And so it's not an easy decision, but I think if you look at it, you take money off the table and you just look at it from, well, what should we do? What's the safe play? What's the right move for people? Then that has to be what they're doing here. And, and especially, bracing for Thanksgiving, where a lot of people are probably still going to go out and get together, even though most everyone out there is advising not to. You just have to brace for that. And I think we'll know by the end of November whether that will impact the basketball season into December. And it very well might. I mean, like right now they're sitting on Allen Fieldhouse having, 1,500 or so, which may end up being closer to 2,500 by the time it's all said and done. And you get all the tickets and the fans and the families and things like that. But right now, if this thing continues to go the way it's going, that might be from 1,500 to 0 in a hurry. And, I don't know that putting 1,500 fans in Allen Fieldhouse is saving you enough money to warrant the risk, right? I think it's kind of like, yeah, there's some money to be made there, but man, this is an indoor sport. You're trying to get this season in, because more than the fans and more than the ticket sales and all that, you need to have the season, because you need to have that television money and you need to get to March Madness. And that's a long way between now and then. So I think the next couple of weeks, I think it's a great move for November. It's not only smart, safe, and all those things, but it also is being done at a time where the fans, KU fans, can get their heads around, okay, no fans. So then if they have to make the decision to go no fans in Allen Fieldhouse in December, they've had a head start in warming up to the idea. It's, people are still going to hate it and they're not going to like it. But look, they're not going to like it anyway, because, people aren't going to be sitting close to the court. Once I heard 20 rows up, nothing closer than that. So fans that have had great seats aren't going to have their great seats. They're going to be up higher than they're used to. That's going to feel weird to them if they are there. And you might as well just throw this one away and say, I'm going to watch these guys on TV. I'm going to be in my sweats, and I'm going to have a 12-pack of beer or Coke that cost me as much as, a Coke and a popcorn at a game. And I'm going to be really happy and comfortable, and we'll get through this year, and then we'll see what next year's about. So, I'm not trying to preach to anybody. Everybody's got the right to feel how they feel, but I just think that this is definitely the right move for now, and an easy one to make. And then we'll see what happens into December.
Yeah, having a season is the goal, and that's the key point that you were trying to bring up there is I know there's ways for fans to watch sports and to be social distance, to wear masks and stuff like that and be safe, but if we are doing this at every single level, if that's the goal, it's like to get through a season and avoid as much as we can the cancellations or the quarantines and stuff like that, then be as safe as possible. And if that means no fans, that means no fans. For me, I don't see the reason to be that upset about it. Again, maybe it's because I wouldn't be going as a fan, and so that's probably why. But for pro sports, I mean, if I had the option to go to a Ravens game around here or something like that, I wouldn't want to go. So I don't know. Having a season to me would seem like the most important thing for everybody. and figuring out a way to do that is as safe as possible is probably the way to go.
Yep, well said. I like that a lot. Before we get out of here, we got a few minutes left, but there was also some news from college basketball this week about the tournament, which it's weird, Shane, to think about March not being that far away, but it's really not. I mean, this month's almost over. You know, I know it's only the 18th today, but you know, it'll be Thanksgiving before we know it. That's boom, 26th, and then we're out. And then December, and it's the holidays, and it's Christmas, and that always goes pretty fast, I think. And then March is 3 months away. So it's wild to think that. But obviously the news that came out this week, for those who might not have heard, is that the NCAA is looking at hosting the entire tournament in one spot this year. And that spot right now is Indianapolis. They're in talks with Indianapolis about having the whole thing in Indy, and there's a lot of things that still need to kind of come out and play out in that. My guess is that it would end up being 64 teams. They wouldn't have a play-in round or anything like that, because with the Ivy League canceling winter sports, there's already one of those automatic bids that you can get back, and so you don't need those 4 play-in teams. One of them gets in based off that, and there may be other leagues that this happens to that don't end up getting in to a full season or deciding to shut it down or whatever. So hopefully not, but you know, I think it could be 64 teams, but I think it's a really interesting thing. I think it's a safe play. Again, it's a good move. I mean, it sucks for all those communities like Wichita and Dallas and Boise, Idaho, and then Minneapolis and Denver. And, you know, it sucks for all those places that were planning on hosting NCAA tournament basketball this coming year, but man, who knew, you know, and we just have to get through this. So I think the idea of putting it in one spot gives it the best chance of happening. Do you like it?
I think that would be very exciting. I personally, and you know, we've seen obviously at the NBA level, the bubble environment there, and it worked out. So I think that would be exciting and probably the best move, given that, you know, what they did lose last March when all this originally went down. And yeah, I mean, obviously it does suck for the communities, as you mentioned, but, you know, there's no guarantee that their restaurants are going to be open at around that time where they get all those businesses anyways, or it'd be safe to eat in a restaurant like that, or go to a bar. So yeah, it would suck those communities, but we also don't know the situation's going to happen here in a few months because we don't know what's going to happen next week. And so again, it's just about trying to, you know, minimize as much risk as possible. Yeah,
good point. I think that, like I said, there's still a lot to figure out about the way it would work, but I did talk to some people last night about it and at least their understanding. What I kind of wrote was that there are 10 Division I college basketball programs in the state of Indiana, and I think 5 or 6 of them are within 70 miles or so of Indianapolis. So I thought maybe they would go out and use Bloomington, where Indiana University is, or West Lafayette, where Purdue is, and use their venues and have it be a little bit, you know, it's Indy, but it's kind of the outlier there, and it's you know, they're there, but they're not. But it sounds like it's all Indy. It sounds like all Indy city limits, and I was actually talking to Coach Self about it, and you know, there's a handful of venues there. There's Bankers Life Fieldhouse, where the Pacers play. There's Hinkle, where Butler plays, which is a fabulous place, and that would be really cool to have NCAA tournament games there. There's another smaller college in Indianapolis. I can't remember what it is right now, but that has a venue like that. And then there's Lucas Oil Stadium, where the Final Four was going to be anyway. Mm-hmm. Anybody that's watched or seen or been to or covered a Final Four in the past, you know, decade plus knows that tiny court is put in the middle of this giant stadium and this giant football field. And if you think about it, and I'm not saying they will do this, but if you think about it, you could probably put 3 courts in Lucas Oil Stadium and curtain them off and have it be a really weird experience, almost like AAU stuff, right? Yeah. But you could get venues that way by, instead of that just being one, you play multiple. You could have 3 NCAA tournament games going on at the same time at Lucas Oil Field or Stadium and have that happening all day. and that's how you could get your games in. So there's all kinds of things that could still happen with that. Obviously, maybe they don't even go with the 64 team tournament. Maybe it's down to 32 this year, and they just get it in how they can get it in. Hopefully things go well enough that it can resemble the closest thing to what we've seen in the past, but it's going to be different. And the idea that it could be in one city is pretty remarkable. Kind of terrifying in some ways, because you're going to have all the fans and all the media and all those people descending upon the same place. But my guess is there will be limits there too. I mean, there will be limits on who can come cover it. There will be limits on fans. It may be limited to, players' families and staff families and things like that. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll get better news that opens that up a little bit more, but it's wild. It's fun to think about the possibilities, and Indy would be a good host. And yeah, the NCAA headquarters are in Indianapolis. Excuse me. That was slow. But I've seen people take shots at them for doing that. And it's like, they're trying to save money too, so why wouldn't you? If that's one of the places that you can actually pull this off and it's in your own backyard, then that saves you a lot of money from having to send your staff and people to travel and all those kinds of things. So I think it's cool. I think it'll be fun if it happens. And I think it will happen.
People care about what town it is in.
Oh yeah.
They're upset about it being in Indianapolis. I don't know. I feel like that's perfect. A place for it, actually.
People care about everything, Shane.
Midwest basketball. I mean, I think that's perfect.
Yeah, I haven't heard. I mean, they did say in their press release announcing that this was the plan, that they have some other cities in mind in case negotiations don't go the way they want in Indianapolis. They will. It's going to work out. That's where it's going to be. But they have other cities in mind. I haven't heard what those are. I haven't asked too many people about it, but I'm curious. I think I've heard some people kick around Kansas City like that, that's cool. That's great. And I think the Big 12 could do it. I mean, I don't know that you could host an entire 64 team tournament in Kansas City. I mean, yeah, you have Sprint Center T-Mobile Center and Municipal and the old Kemper and things like that. But you don't have as many hotels, and it's not as big a city and things like that. So, but Big 12 wise, I mean, I would love to see the Big 12 decide that they're going to do it that way their entire season and just say, listen, we're going to send all 10 teams to Kansas City for January and February. And we're going to, each team's going to stay in its own hotel. And we're just going to play out the season. And there's a good chance, if not a great chance, that this is going to be all online schooling anyway in the spring. So you would still be able to do that, and there would be plenty of downtime for classes to run and your guys to take care of their academic stuff and all that. And then you just hang out in Kansas City for 2 months and you play the Big 12 season, and there's no traveling to West Virginia, and there's no traveling to Lubbock, Texas, and there's no traveling to Ames, Iowa, and it's that to me is one of the coolest things that I think could happen. I also like the idea of doing what volleyball's done, which is, when Kansas hosts Texas Tech this weekend, they would normally do a home and home thing. Well, they're going to play 2 matches, one on Thursday and one on Friday, and then that's over. And they did that with 5 teams, and then they went on the road for 5 teams. And I think that's cool, man. I think that if the Big 12 college basketball situation turned into that'd be fantastic. I mean, KU goes down to, let's see, what do they have? They play at Lubbock December 17th. So while they're there, play 2. And now Texas Tech doesn't have to come back up here in February. And then you host West Virginia on December 22nd. And while they're here, you play 2, one day and the next day. And then you don't have to go all the way back out there to Morgantown later in the season. I mean, it may be too far down the road, but that's also a couple of options that could happen if there becomes a need to adjust. And that's kind of one of the last things I want to ask you. I mean, I know you're not Dr. Fauci, and I know you're not Bob Bowlesby, and I know you're just Shane Jackson, even though I tried to introduce you twice. But how much in your mind and what you're guessing and reading and hearing and talking to people and just trying to figure this thing out too, how likely do you think it is that there's going to be disruptions this coming basketball season. I mean, we're almost there. It's next week, and maybe they're going to get it off. But how likely do you think there is that there will be a lot of disruption?
Well, first off, I think you saved college basketball with your Kansas City idea in 2 months.
It's probably not my idea. I probably stole it from someone. I don't know. I've heard it. I didn't just dream it up, but wherever I heard it, I love it. I think it's a great idea, and it would be a lot of fun.
But no, in terms of like just potentially missing games or like teams having to quarantine, yeah, I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that's probably going to happen at some point in the season, like for a lot of teams. So yeah, I think there will be disruptions. It's about how many disruptions there are going to be, and if they can still push through and have a season to ultimately get to March, as we've mentioned already, is the end goal. So that remains to be seen. I think there's a way to do it. I think football's proven that to a certain extent, but yeah, I think there's going to be disruptions in terms of teams having to miss games or postponements or stuff like that, and that's just going to have to happen. I mean, that's the way everything is working lately. So figuring out a way to ultimately push through is probably what everybody's goal is.
Yeah, I think that's dead on, man. I think I've been really impressed with KU and their approach. And I mean, not just from administration and coaches, which obviously are going to do everything they can because they're in charge and it's their responsibility to do that. But I think the players' buy-in has been terrific. I think these guys desperately want to play. I don't think it's not even about playing because March stung so bad. That sucked. And a lot of these guys were a part of that. But I think it's just they just want to play because that's what they're here to do, and that's what they do. And the idea of missing out because they got careless or they were lazy or they didn't follow the rules. I mean, I don't think these guys are at all interested in dealing with those consequences. I think the temporary sacrifices you have to make to do what you love to do is very easy for these guys to follow and to do. And they're obviously doing it great so far. And it'll be interesting when they start traveling and when they start, interacting with other teams. And there's no perfect system other than the true bubble, which college basketball cannot afford to do. So that would be wild if they could. I mean, that would, the NBA thing. How long did that end up being? Do you remember? I mean, it started.
I don't. That's what I was thinking about when you were talking about your 2-month bubble with the Big 12 play, and then potentially what would be a bubble in March Madness. I was like, man, that would, I think, be longer than what the NBA bubble was, right? Like, I don't remember exactly the dates that it was, but
I know it ended on. I mean, the Lakers game against the whoever they beat. Who'd they beat in the finals?
The Miami Heat. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, their Game 6 win was October 11th.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it started in late August. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Started back up in late August.
Yeah.
So somewhere in that range. I mean, which is about 2 months, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean that's a whole season of that would be. I mean, you're talking December, January, February. It would be longer, I think. Yeah, and it's just not feasible. Even even the NBA is not going to do that when they start back up.
No, exactly, yeah.
So it's got to be figured out. It's got to be, coaches holding kids accountable and trying to make them do the right thing. And you got to get a little lucky too, because obviously, as Jeff Long has said over and over and over and over throughout this process, the virus is in control, and that's still the case. And you can do all the things right and try to play by all the rules and be as safe as possible, and you still might be dealt some bad luck. And if that's what happens, that's what happens. But I have, like I said, I have been impressed with the way KU's handled this part of it. And now they head to Fort Myers next Thursday on Thanksgiving for a game against Gonzaga that should be the most exciting thing in the world. I mean, those two matching up against each other and the start of college basketball season. We've seen everything else, right? We've seen NFL, we've seen NBA, we've seen Major League Baseball, we've seen college football, we've seen WNBA, we've seen tennis and golf and soccer. This is the one that we're waiting on. And if they actually tip it off, which the rest of the country is able to play next Wednesday on the 25th, and KU won't play until the 26th, but there will be college basketball games a day before that. And then KU women play that day. So it's remarkable to think that we're that close to getting back to it. And now we just have to hold on and hope we can jump on for the ride and watch a lot of it. So Shane, any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up? We got to a lot of stuff, man. When Benton's not here bogging us down, it just gives us a lot of opportunity. He's so long-winded and he talks so much, and we've got an opportunity here to just jump into a lot of things. But I'm glad we got to all of them. I mean, I think the no fans thing is interesting. I think the Indy thing is very interesting, and talked a little football. What else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
I was just going to say, I think earlier in the podcast, this has felt like the first week that basketball is actually like close, though. Like college basketball is closer on the corner. I don't know if it was because high school, KU football, and all that stuff. I just hadn't even thought about college basketball. But this was the first week. I don't know if it's because of the NBA draft or because actually next week is when play starts. But it's finally like gearing up for the start of the season. And as you kind of alluded to, this is what we've all been waiting for, is the last sport. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think it has kind of snuck up on us because of that. I mean, it's we've been writing features and kind of covering it, but now, like, starting with this week's presser, it's time to start asking about an opponent and that, thinking about the matchup, and that's I've got to dust off my notebook and my pen and make sure that I'm ready to remember how to do that, because it seems like it's been a long time. And what's wild is to think about, November 10th was supposed to be the first game. If nothing ever happened, they would have played Kentucky on November 10th up in Chicago. And here we are 8 days past that. And we'd already have a couple games under our belts, and KU we'd know what they look like a little bit. And now we've got to wait another week, which is obviously doable, but that is wild to think about. And I do think I like that what you said about the draft. Like, it's really nice today. It's warm outside. It's sunny. Like that it doesn't feel like June, don't get me wrong, but you can wear shorts and a t-shirt out there, and that's summer weather and summer wardrobe. And so there's something about today that maybe it's just because it is the draft, but it does feel like the draft. And that's cool, because I didn't think that was going to happen at all. I thought we'd almost like forget about it. Like,
yeah, especially with all the off-season stuff happening at the same time. Yeah. Sure,
and we squeeze it in here in November just to get it in. But again, I am really looking forward to seeing where those guys end up. It's fun every year to kind of project where they're going to end up and where they're going to, how they're going to do when they get there. And so I think these guys both have a chance. Udoka and Devon have a great chance to do great things for a long time in that league, and I think they'll represent KU very well. So speaking of that, Shane, you have represented KU Sports and the KU Sports Hour very well today. You carried the weight of two men. One is named Shane Jackson, one is named Benton Smith. And, I mean, on behalf of all of our listeners and readers, I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for the acknowledgement. It's about time.
That was Shane Jackson. You got to hear a lot more from him today. I know I still did my rambling business, and if you listen through it, I really appreciate it. We do, man. We appreciate everybody that comes to the site. We appreciate you guys for following along and enjoying our stuff and giving us feedback, good, bad, whatever. I mean, we're nothing without you guys, and we love the interaction and we love doing it for you guys, and we're looking forward to the start of the basketball season for sure, and the end of football. I mean, there's still some stuff to watch there, and it's going to start getting really fun. So for Shane Jackson, I'm Matt Tate. That's the KU Sports Hour today. Thanks for checking it out, and we'll be back early next week with another full-blown KU basketball season preview podcast. And yes, Benton will be a part of that one. So if you missed him, hang in there. He'll be back. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode. Take care of yourselves. Happy Thanksgiving, all that stuff, and we'll talk to you guys again real soon.